Hello and welcome to episode number 1 of the Expert Table Tennis Podcast. My name is Ben Larcombe. I'm a table tennis player, coach and blogger, and I'm going to be using these episodes to interview a handful of different experts. There might be professional players or coaches or sports scientists, and they're going to be sharing a story or a message with you, and hopefully you'll be able to come away with a particular point that you can apply to your table tennis to get some better results. That's the plan anyway. In today's episode, I'm joined by Matt Hetherington, who, if you're a fan of table tennis and kind of internet savvy, I'm sure you will have heard of, because he runs the website Matt Hetherington Table Tennis, which has been around for a while now. Matt is a really cool guy. He's currently living in America. He's from New Zealand. You'll hear more about that in the show. And he's going to be talking to us about the trade-off between consistency and power, which is something that I believe is really relevant at the moment. One, because play at the elite level has become so powerful, so aggressive compared to in kind of past years, and 2, because we're seeing a lot of attention being given to things like trick shots, highlights on YouTube. We're starting to see a lot of kind of like fancy play coming into ordinary table tennis, and maybe that's slightly warping our perspective of what quote unquote good table tennis is. So I'm going to be talking to Matt about the importance of becoming a consistent player and how you can become a consistent player and why you should become a consistent player. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. I'm not going to waffle on for any more. Let's get straight into it with Matt Hetherington. So I'm joined today by Matt Hetherington. Matt is a table tennis blogger from New Zealand who's now living in America. And Matt, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for being my first podcast guest, and I'd just like to find out a little bit more about you so that people can know who you are. One thing I remember from talking to you before, you were born in the UK, is that right?
I was. I was born in Blackpool. I moved to New Zealand in 1995, so I was only 5 years old when I shipped.
Okay. So how old are you now?
I am turning 25 next month.
Okay, so you're a year younger than me. Moved to New Zealand when you were 5, and then you're currently in America. It seems like you've been kind of all around in the last couple of years. Can you explain kind of what your life's been like recently?
Yeah, well, I came here just after. First I went to Austria, so it all kind of stemmed from the World Hopes program, which for everyone that doesn't know is like the 11 and 12-year-old development program that the ITTF has.
Sure.
So I went to Austria and we qualified a player from New Zealand that made the World Hopes team. And for the first time, the training camp was in America. So obviously, I came with him. And
so you were his coach for you?
Yeah. I'm not really his coach back in New Zealand, but I landed the role of coaching the National Hopes contingent, I guess.
Okay.
So it was at the Lily-Ip Table Tennis Centre. So I came here in August 2013.
Okay.
And yeah, this is my 4th time back here since then. So I have been here quite a lot in the last couple of years. And hopefully I can stay here for a little bit longer.
You can't get enough of America and the Lily-Ip Table Tennis Centre?
For now, yeah.
Okay. So you're doing some coaching, you're still playing yourself, is that true?
Yeah, I'm playing a lot myself now. I'm trying to play every morning, so I try and get at least 2 to 3 hours in the morning.
Okay.
And, depending how much energy I have in the evening, I try and do it all again in the evening.
So you're trying to do twice a day?
I'm trying. I've had some success so far. So.
And what are your goals as a player now?
I'm actually heading back to New Zealand in August, just for a short amount of time. So I'll be playing the national championships and trying to make the team again. I haven't played a world championships, so that's really my main goal at the moment.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Before I get too old.
Nice. Well, I know that you've got a lot of experience as a coach, and you've also had the chance to meet with loads of other experts in table tennis from all over the world. So I wanted just to pick your brain and see, particularly for my audience, which is mainly kind of intermediate level or improving table tennis players, are there any kind of key things that you've picked up in your travels that you think are really important for them to work on and spend some time developing?
Well, it's interesting, especially since I've been to America. A lot of the coaches here are just really pushing consistency, especially the older players. If you talk to some of the players from like before in the 1980s, they'll talk about how much the game has developed, and back then the players that are the level they are now, players the same level before in rating terms, you just wouldn't have seen them like attacking that much off their backhand or being that aggressive. So it seems like across the middle level of the game, players are kind of developing into a more aggressive playing style.
Sure.
Whereas before, it was keep the ball on the table at all costs. So yeah, that was quite interesting. There was just a huge focus on that, and more on matches. I think the training is kind of changed a lot more to drills, and before it sounded like a lot of it was very, very match focused. It came down to practice, and it was just matches.
So you're seeing, because in many ways the game's becoming faster, more powerful. You're seeing, points are getting shorter.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems that we kind of encountered, me and Sam, while we were doing this challenge, was due to all of this going on, should we focus on serve attack and just kind of forget about consistency too much and just focus on having a few key shots, or are we better off spending hours and hours trying to kind of like groove shots so that we are able to play without a mistake, and then maybe it's not relevant in a game? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the difficult thing for you and Sam was that you had a time frame. So, a year is not really a long time in table tennis terms. I think you'll get to a point where you can change the focus from technique and consistency to more kind of tactical game type stuff.
Sure.
And I mean, it doesn't mean you stop doing the technique and the consistency, but you're kind of maintaining them or improving them at a slow rate. Once the player kind of has a solid ability to execute basic shots.
So are you still saying that you believe that people should really focus on the technique, the basics, the consistency, and not worry so much about kind of all the aggression and maybe some of the newer modern shots when they're learning? Or do you think things have changed?
Well, I mean, up to a certain level, the difference between winning or losing kind of comes largely down onto who can keep the most balls on the table. I mean, at a low level, some players can hit big shots, but really, if you're playing lower level players, if you can keep the ball in play, then they're more likely to make an error than you are. It's a difficult call because there are some players who can play matches and they can serve and attack quite well, even though they may not be that consistent.
Yeah.
Which is why this discussion is hopefully going to be very interesting.
But I think one thing that we found with Sam was that we were able to make a really nice highlights reel. If you take one of his matches, you can get 3 or 4 points where he looks unbelievable, but then you miss you cut out all of the points where he's just making error after error after error. And it seems like more and more players, and especially some of the kids that I see, are kind of focusing on all of these fantastic shots, and you're seeing it all on Facebook and kind of like the one shot wonder kind of thing.
Well,
is really being pushed, and obviously it's a lot more exciting than kind of keeping the ball on the table. But is it working in a match?
Well, I mean, it is more exciting in the terms of 1 point, but the quality of the whole match is probably not going to be as good as it could be. If you're focusing on playing miracle shots, I mean, the amount of risk, you have to weigh up the amount of risk, and maybe you might make 1 in 10, but that's probably not going to help you win 11 points.
Let's have a think about kind of the way that this is managed with young, talented players that maybe are the kind of ones that you're coaching in these ITTF Hope things, so kind of 11, 12-year-olds. Do you think that, because one thing that I've noticed before, and I've spoken to Brian Pace about this, is that if you take an 11 and 12-year-old that's really good, they don't really have the physical capacity to have loads of power in their shots.
Yeah.
So do they play kind of this consistency game because they can't play with power, which is one thing when I had Sam, we were kind of thinking, well, he's got the advantage that he can use all of this power and strength that he's got.
Yeah.
Or are they kind of like strategically choosing to, or being told to play more of a consistency game and to not worry about power?
Well, it's probably more the restriction, I would say.
Okay.
I mean, what you're hoping for with the younger players is that they can repeat this kind of consistent lower power game and really, really get to a level where their footwork's good, they can get into position, they can place the ball well, and then once they start growing and developing a little more and they can implement power into their game, you know, they've already got this really solid base of being able to move and hit the ball wherever they want.
Sure.
So obviously they become a lot more effective in a game once they can add power and a bit more variation into that.
So I've certainly seen that at kind of when you go along to the national championships for the younger kids, under 11, under 12, and you see these kind of epically long rallies where they're backhand punching and just kind of like a soft forehand topspin, and they're both quite close to the table, moving each other around, and it can be quite almost more interesting to watch than the adult games because they go on for so long and you can see them trying to kind of outmaneuver the other person.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I went to Austria to the Schlager Academy, they had the World Hopes trial there. So there were 30 boys and 30 girls, and it was a lot of the same. Some of them could loop okay, but there wasn't really any standout player that was, overwhelmingly powerful.
Okay.
But they were all trying to play each other with the same game. So you kind of spot the ones that have a little bit more kind of idea about how to win points and like a bit more tactical vision, because when you're playing someone who does exactly the same thing as you have to try and do something different to everyone else, or
of course,
or be better at doing what everyone's doing. I mean, there were all of the players there. The level of you could see the focus was really on basic technique. Like they were really strong at all the basic stuff.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think how, because I mean, I think this is the same for you. I came into the game, I started playing at a fairly young age, but didn't really take it seriously until later. And I think I definitely missed some of this, really heavy drilling, when you were a younger player, but being kind of like really competent and tactically aware. Like I missed a lot of that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I didn't really have the opportunity to train for probably a period of about 6 years. And when I moved to, I had to move city. When I moved to university, I'd kind of become this player that just had played low-level players for quite a long time. And so I was just serving and trying to hit the ball really hard. So I actually had to kind of work backwards as well. Because my shots were just too big, and when you're trying to get into a national team, there's just too much risk. You might beat a high-level player one day, but you might lose to 2 low-level players when nothing going on.
Sure.
So yeah, I definitely had that. I had to focus a lot on just simplifying things, and repetitively keeping the ball on the table.
I guess that's a problem that a lot of people have, where they feel like on a good day they're able to go and beat anyone, but then they have these terrible losses against people and they can't believe they.
Yeah.
Do you think that's mainly down to kind of not building up this foundation of consistency?
In part, yeah. I mean, it's partially that. If you're playing a player that if you played a good control game, you feel like you should beat them. Then yeah, it's a huge problem. I mean, a lot of the time you'll lose to a lower player, not really by being kind of outplayed on tactics. Maybe on small occasion, but usually you're just not able to execute your shots. Maybe you're hitting a little bit too hard, or it comes down to missing quite a lot of the time, and you just feel like your game's not really on. But you kind of need that backup game of, hey, I'm not making my big opening shots or my third ball attacks. I need to just slow down and play more spin or play a little better placement.
Sure.
So I've worked on that a lot since I came to the States, and that's helped quite a lot. Just being able to, they used to say, make sure you can, on a bad day, you can play good table tennis, and on a good day, you can play your best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I've just thought about, how does spin come into this kind of consistency power debate? Are these kids being told to kind of keep the power down but encouraged to use a really high amount of spin, or is the spin also kind of added later with some of the power and acceleration in the shots?
The heavy spin, I mean, for a lot of them, there's a limited amount of weight that can transfer into the ball. So you'll find it's easier for them to try and generate spin through their hand speed than it is for them to hit a big shot.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of just an added weapon for them. Like, if they can add some spin, at least they have more variation. And, sometimes if they're a little further back from the table, or if they're out of position, then it's easier for them to put more spin on the ball to keep the ball in play than it is for them to try and hit a big ball.
Yeah.
A kind of safety margin, like they just add spin just to try and keep the ball more consistent.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Because the spin's going to give them a bit more of an arc and a bit more chance of the ball going on. Let's say there are some people listening to this who are thinking that kind of what you've been saying is really speaking to them, and that they think they've been going for too much power. They understand that they haven't quite built up the consistency that they need to be able to perform at kind of a steady level in all of their matches. Like, what kind of drills would you recommend that they start to implement in their practice? Is it just about doing things like Falkenberg over and over, or are there other strategies that you can use to improve the consistency?
I think it's not necessarily what drill you do. It's more a matter of how you manage your drill while you're doing it. Like, you won't see as often players that are really focused on, like, you might go into a drill and say, okay, I'm going to do a 2-point forehand drill, and I'm going to keep doing it until I can loop 30 balls on the table. So I'm going to really, really focus on a high number of repetitions and just focus on being able to execute 30 times or 50 times. I mean, it's not down to a specific drill. Every drill is going to help you with some kind of stroke, and you need to try and develop consistency with everything.
Sure. So you're saying it's more of a mindset shift where you're just keeping in the back of your mind that whatever you're doing, you need to be, the first priority is consistency.
Yeah. I mean, if you're just doing a drill over and over again, you'll find, like, sometimes you'll lose a little bit of focus. Like, it becomes a little repetitive. A lot of the time, if you're aiming towards, like, you might want to hit 100 forehands, and I find this with the kids here. Um, if you tell them to hit forehands to you, they might average depending on the level, but say you have a low level kid, they might hit 5 to 10 balls on the table, and then they'll do something crazy. But if you tell them you have to hit 100 balls, and if you don't, then you're going to keep doing this, you'll find the average kind of creeps up pretty quickly.
Okay.
Because they don't want to spend all of their time doing the same thing. So
you're just creating an environment where consistency is kind of rewarded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, or inconsistency is punished more.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's been really helpful, thinking about, just the importance of changing that mindset so that you're prioritizing consistency and then maybe building up in power later.
Yeah. It boils down to one thing. It's easier to develop yourself as a consistent player and develop power later on. If you develop yourself as a power player and you don't focus at all on consistency, it becomes a lot harder to kind of restrain yourself from playing power all the time to work on consistency. So one way is kind of working forwards and one way is working backwards a little.
Yeah, I'll tell you something that I tried with Sam quite early on in the challenge, which was we found a video of Ma Long doing open-ups and he watched it over and over, and then we decided, right, all he's got to do is try and master this. This is after he'd been playing for less than 10 weeks. Try and master the Ma Long open-up, and then we'll just say he starts off on 5% consistency, then we'll bump it up to 20% consistency. Yeah, that did not work at all. That was one of the stupidest things I ever did. So I completely agree that start with consistency and then just make those kind of small improvements to the power and the quality of the shot, instead of trying to start with an amazing shot and then kind of hoping that consistency gets better, because we just saw that his consistency didn't really change at all.
Well, yeah, we have a player here that there's kind of a group of 13, 14-year-old kids, and he's kind of been at the back of that group for a while. They're all a little bit, they improved a little bit faster than him. But he's definitely the most consistent. And now that he's starting to develop more power, you can kind of see that he's starting to get some better results. And we've kind of picked him and said, well, hey, at some point he's probably going to overtake the rest of them.
Just because he's already got the consistency.
Yeah, he can keep a much higher number of balls on the table. And even if he plays kind of consistent, and then throws in the power shot every now and then, it's still going to make a huge difference for him.
It's a really interesting debate, actually, because I remember reading almost the opposite to what you just said in one of Larry Hodges' books, where he was saying about kind of how the consistent player will kind of beat the more aggressive player at the start, and then eventually the consistent player who's kind of too scared to play the aggressive shots will lose and then quit. And there's just so many different views, aren't there?
Yeah, but that's kind of addressing a consistent player that would, it sounds like he's saying one that would not really attack as much.
Yeah, I think he was pointing out more of the passive side of the consistent player, whereas you're not talking about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to develop a player that had no weapons at all, just one who just kind of plonk the ball back on the table over and over again. It's definitely about you want to develop a well-rounded kind of power player, but just one that can execute a lot and can kick the ball in when they need to.
Because that is the other side of the trap. So you've got the highlights reel player on one side, and then I've definitely coached players before that no matter what you try and do to kind of get some kind of aggressive shots out of them, when it goes into the game, they just go back to their pushing and blocking, and they just don't do anything. How would you, let's say someone's listening to this and they know that when they play their games, they just end up they're so scared to miss, they just want to keep everything on, that they end up losing because they don't do anything. What would be your advice for them?
Really, you need to We used to have players like that. I remember when I was really young, maybe 10 or maybe 9 or 10. We used to play a lot of different matches. We used to play like a match where you could only push.
Yep.
We used to play a match where you could only play topspin. And also, this is kind of funny. This is where you can actually use the expedite rule for training.
Okay.
You can kind of play matches where after so many balls, they have to attack.
Yeah.
It's really it's kind of a hard psychological thing to get somebody to get over. Basically, they need to just get their opening ball level to a point where they have enough confidence to use it.
Yeah.
Because that's all it boils down to.
But that was always the argument. I'd say go for an open up, and they'd say, "Oh, my open up always misses," so they just end up pushing. But
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you just need to practice it to a point where they're not going to be like, "Well, my open up always misses." You need,
yeah,
if they're going to be like, "Well, I can make my open up 70% of the time," then it's much more worth it than pushing around until the other person attacks.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's been brilliant. So I'm taking from this, and correct me if I'm misquoting you, that kind of consistency is king, at least at the beginner level. So you've got to make sure your consistency is good, and then you can start looking to increase the quality of your shots after that. And if you are a kind of super consistent passive player, then that's not really what we're talking about. What we want is kind of a consistent attacking game where you're kind of not going too far one way, but then taking the initiative yourself. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just about creating a platform. Like, you need that base even if you want to play a little more power, it's just necessary. Like, you need that base of consistency, at least.
Get the foundations. Yeah. And the way to do that is with the mindset. So don't start thinking that one drill is going to solve everything.
There's no
it's about
drill.
I guess it's like that with everything, isn't it? It's just hard work, lots of time, and constantly thinking about it and trying to apply it. Brilliant. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was good.
If people are interested in learning a bit more about you and following what you're up to, where can they go to check you out?
I have a table tennis blog and a Facebook page for that as well. I'm trying to write on it a little more. It kind of comes and goes in phases, but I kind of pop up everywhere. So.
And that's mhtabletennis.com. MH for Matt Hetherington. Cool. Thank you very much, Matt.
No problem.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
I will.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, Matt.
Bye.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode and everything that we learned from Matt. I'd ask that you would forgive me for being such a terrible interviewer. This is the first interview I've ever done. And as you know, I believe that practice equals success. So I'm going to keep practicing my interviewing, and I'm sure it will get better. At least I hope it will. I'm also messing around trying to edit this so that it comes across well and doesn't have background noise and things. I don't really know what I'm doing, so hopefully the quality of the podcasts from an editing side should improve as we go on as well. Do go to mhtabletennis.com if you'd like to find out anything more about Matt Hetherington and read all of his brilliant blog posts. If you want to check out what I'm up to, then go to experttabletennis.com. And I'd also ask you that if you have enjoyed this episode, then if you could leave a review for the podcast on iTunes, that would be brilliant. We're a brand new podcast, and the reviews are going to help us get noticed in iTunes. So please leave an honest review if you can. And experttabletennis.com is the place to read everything that I'm up to. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.